In this question, we want to look at the money market under the assumption that the only bank in the economy is the central bank. There are no commercial banks in the economy collecting deposits. Now, the first part is about finding money demand for two interest rates. And here we need to keep in mind that we're assuming that there's just two assets in which you can keep your wealth, money and bonds. So money demand represents how much of your wealth do you want to keep in the form of money, which pays no interest, versus bonds, which pay an interest given to us as I. So let's find money demand for these two given interest rates. So the first part is, so money demand is $1 times 0.08 minus 0.4i. For $y, we know represents nominal income, which is 5,000 in this case. Now we can simplify this as 400 minus 2,000i. So now we want to find money demand for two given interest rates. So money demand, we have I is 5% and we have I is 10%. So this would be 400 minus 2000 into 0.05, which will just be $300. And this will be 400 minus 2000 into 10%, which is 0.1, which is $200. So this was part. Part 2 is asking us to see the relationship between I and MD. We know, okay, we can see from here that as interest rate increases from 5% to 10%, money demand goes down from 300 to 200. So let's try to analyze why is that. Here drawings. Now let's do part 2. So part 2 is that as I increases, we know money demand decreases. But the question arises why. So for this, first let's keep in mind, what does I represent? Remember, I represents the interest rate on bonds, which is an alternative form to hold wealth in rather than money. So this is important to remember. You can keep your wealth in the form of either money, which pays no interest, versus bonds, which pay an interest. And the interest rate on bonds is what I is represented, right? And money demand depends negatively on this interest rate on bonds. Why? Because a higher I means higher interest rate on bonds mean higher opportunity cost of holding wealth in form of money rather than bonds. So it's more attractive to hold bonds which pay interest. That's right. So this is part 2, right? There's an inverse relationship between money demand and the interest rate on bonds, because bonds are an alternative way in which you can keep your wealth. So the higher the interest rate, the more attractive to hold bonds are. So then we have the next part in which you want to find the equilibrium interest rate in the economy. So part B is that equilibrium I occurs where we know MS is equal to MD, right? Money supply is equal to money demand. We know this is money supply fixed by central bank at M is equal to $100 in this case. And you know MD represents money demand. So equilibrium interest rate occurs where money supply, which is $100 in this case, is equal to money demand. And in from part A, we simplify this as 400 minus 2000. So this is from part A. And from here, we can make I the subject, and I will turn out to be equal to 0.15 or 15%. So now moving on to part 3, in which we want to draw the money market equilibrium diagram. So when you want to plot this, So on the vertical axis, we have interest rate I, and on the horizontal axis, we have money M. We plot a vertical money supply curve MS, and this is vertical at the level of money supply fixed by the central bank, which is 100. M is equal to 100, right? So this is vertical as the money supply. So just write this down. This is vertical as MS is fixed by the central bank, and in particular doesn't depend upon interest rate. Does not depend on I. In this case, MS is fixed at M is equal to $100. That's why we drawn it as a vertical line at the level of money supply fixed by the central bank. And then we have a downward sloping MD, which where it's given to us as 400 minus 2000 I. And so we can see that this is downward sloping. Sloping curve, since we know there's a negative relationship between I and MD, since as I increases, MD decreases. We already established in part A why this basically is because remember I represents the interest rate on bonds, which is an alternative way to hold wealth in other money. And we know money market equilibrium occurs. So money market equilibrium occurs where MS is equal to MD, and this we know is equal to, and the equilibrium interest rate is 15% from part B. So this is our money market diagram where we have a vertical money supply curve at the level of money supply fixed by the central bank, which is $100. We have a downward sloping money demand curve since we know there's an inverse relationship between the interest rate on bonds I and money demand. And equilibrium occurs at the point of intersection, giving us the equilibrium interest rate of 15%.